Welcome. You can see you're in a panel about lecture capture, presentation recording, and webcasts, how to select a good solution. Thanks for coming today. My name is Paul Reesmandel, and I work at Northwestern University at the School of Communication. I have a title of Director of Curriculum Support, where my specialty has been online video, video conferencing, production, and other educational technology tools. I'm also the education columnist and contributing editor to Streaming Media Magazine. I write the Class Act column, which appears in most issues, where I try to take up issues, especially in online video, facing education and online training. And I'm actually a little curious to see what kind of group we have here. How many of you are coming here from universities or colleges? So a pretty good part of the group. Do we have folks here, anyone from K through 12? Not really K through 12. And do we have folks coming from sort of more of the enterprise learning sector? Okay, I think gives us a sense of the breakdown a little bit. Helps us kind of guide our discussion. Well, with us here we have three veterans in this space, lecture capture space, at their home institutions. So they have combined here, I think, many, many years of experience that they'll be able to share with you. And I always try to leave plenty of time for questions and answers towards the end here, so that if you do questions come up or you've come in with a burning question we haven't addressed, I'd like to make sure we leave some time for that. So we'll go ahead. I'll ask everyone just to quickly introduce yourself and briefly say where you are and what you do.
Fantastic. Good morning. My name is Daniel Bustos. I come from right around the corner here at UCLA. I currently coordinate our lecture capture initiative. I started working at UCLA in '94, left for a brief moment in 2005, and came back in 2006 to spend 10% of my time working on lecture capture, and it has been 110% of the time. And probably this is my first opportunity to kind of get away this year from doing lecture capture full time. Because of the changes that we have made and implemented. So currently we record basically one-on-one camera, a very simple solution, very homegrown solution. We deliver on Silverlight. We also use a Helix Media server to deliver our mobile content. And that's about it for right now.
Good morning. I'm Chuck Allen. I'm from California State University, San Marcos. We're a relatively new school, perhaps the last bricks and mortar college built in California, maybe anywhere ever. So we've only been around for about 20 years now. I've been there for about 16 of those years, so I pretty much built everything that we have in terms of media delivery and capture infrastructure. It's all on me. The blame is totally on me. I did because I built the whole darn thing. We are a media site. It is the core of our media delivery right now and has been since about 2006. We do quite a bit of lecture capture, and right now our media site server probably has about 11,000 separate sessions that have been recorded, just for a gross number, just to give you kind of an idea of the scale and scope of what we do. And that's a good start.
And I'm Todd Stabley, and I'm part of a group at Duke University called Interactive Technology Services. And our focus is on researching and implementing various enterprise video technologies for campus. And some examples of those currently include things like Cisco telepresence, video conferencing and web conferencing, consultation for people who are building multimedia classrooms on campus. We manage a couple of multimedia labs for students that are focused on video. We have a new digital signage project that's just ramping up. And my main focuses have been our enterprise lecture recording service, which we brand as Duke Capture, but the tool that we use underneath that is Panopto currently. And then also our user-generated media publishing service, which we brand as Duke Stream. And that includes both Duke-hosted servers. We have Windows Media Flash and QuickTime Flash servers actually allows the server. And then vendor-hosted tools like YouTube and iTunes U.
Well, let's get started here because, I mean, for all three of your schools, you got started in lecture capture relatively early in the growth of this space. So, Todd, maybe you can talk a little bit about what motivated Duke to start lecture capture. Where did that come from?
Yeah. So that actually is an interesting story. We got involved in this on the heels of the iPod giveaway program that we experimented with in 2004. Some of you might have read about that. We handed out iPods to all the first-year students that year. And kind of in looking at that program, one of the lessons learned, it was definitely an experiment, was that we needed a way to kind of jumpstart the creation of academically focused content that the students could watch on those devices as well as their computers. And so moving into an enterprise lecture capture, solution seemed like a natural fit in that sense and one way of tackling that problem. So that's really probably.
So there was already then some matter of buy-in from both instructors and from administration with regard to creating video content for students?
To some extent, I think it was in some ways kind of a top-down driven project, and there was a lot of work to be done going out into the community and kind of educating people about what lecture capture is and why it would be valuable. But we found people were very responsive to it, and it wasn't very difficult, but there was a ramp up. And by about a year and a half or so, things were going pretty strong. We had about 60 rooms that were being used with the product that we were using before. Panopto was called Lectopia, developed at the University of Western Australia. It's an interesting story for anybody interested in lecture capture. Yeah.
So Chuck, what about you? So you've been at San Marcos since they built it. How did lecture capture come about on your campus?
In our case, it was kind of a build it they will and hope they will come situation. I didn't really have a lot of institutional demand. There was not an awareness of lecture capture as a value proposition within the administrative part of the organization. So really, it really comes down to taking a flyer again on my part, and just from a philosophical point of view, I mean. What does a university create? I mean, well, essentially one of the, we don't make things, we don't make widgets, we don't make stuff you put in a box like a company does, but we make a lot of lectures every day. We make there's hundreds of lectures happen every day. And like most live performances, when they're happening, they are ephemeral. The people that are there experience them and then they're gone. Wouldn't it be better from a philosophical point of view to have some way to capture that for the ages and turn that into and retain the value of this thing, this wonderful stuff that these content matter experts are creating on a daily basis instead of just having it disappear into the ether. So that was kind of the flyer. The other thing that allowed me to do this is being a young campus and constantly building. I've been the AV consultant and IT designer on 10 buildings, which is I may hold the record outside of like architectural fields or something. And so I had one-time building money to do this deployment with, which makes a big difference. I mean, I can sit up here and say, hey, MediaSite, it's a great thing, but I had a fortunate circumstance that allowed me to deploy a $40,000 server and buy $15,000 appliances and do this thing at a time when it was very expensive.
Roll it into something else where maybe if you'd had to do it as an individual project, it would require a bit more of a project plan or a bit more politicking.
Well, yeah, I didn't have to go through the whole, getting the president sold on it, the top down, who are the stakeholders, having a lot of meetings. I could just do it, pull the trigger, wink, wink, again, build it and hope they will come, and luckily they did.
So what about for you, Daniel, at UCLA? How did it come about?
Well, that's a great question because I really don't know. But, knowing what I do know is my boss and his boss are both, they both get it. They just right away they recognize that this was something, this is going to be a
Who's
trend.
your boss?
His name's Rob Rogers, and then his boss is Larry Lohr. They're director and vice chair of educational technology.
Okay, so this is like a campus level position.
It is.
Yeah, okay.
And so they have they have that influence, and they recognize right away. And at the same time, I think we were negotiating with Apple and getting our instance of iTunes U up and running, and I think there was a need for driving content to there. And so again, we had a very similar to Chuck experience to Chuck. That we would build it, hope they would come. We started out with 5 courses in that first fall of 2005. End of that year, we had 20, and then we averaged probably about 300 a year.
And you mentioned in your introduction that you have a bit of a hybrid methodology. You didn't pick a single platform and go forward. How did UCLA, how did you arrive at that methodology?
Well, you know, in 2007, we were looking at the Accordant capture station. Accordant, very similar to Lictopia, very similar to Mediasite. The reason they were local down the road here. And they also had a product called the Media Library. And we were really interested in that product. And we put it out there. We piloted the Accordant for 1 quarter, and then we realized something about our instructors. We realized that our instructors didn't use PowerPoint. The majority of the people we were capturing did not use PowerPoint. They were the sciences, the math, and so they're using board. Sometimes document camera. If we could get them over to document camera, it would be great. But mostly they're using chalkboards and all across the boards. 3 boards, 4 boards, 5 boards, 6 boards. And so we realized that the only way to capture that was a straight-on camera, pan to your shots. And then we just, for a different reason, we arrived at the delivering with Silverlight. And that has to do with cost and the level of automation we could build into the workflow. And it just worked really well for us.
At that point, the curriculum that you were recording, was that demand-driven at that point by the folks in the sciences and the math? I know that those are often places that people do a lot of capture because it's dense subject matter.
Well, the way that we approached it is we equipped 3 large lecture halls with, at that time, is a Niagara Viewcast. So that's just a single video recording system, so just 1-shot camera. But we were able to encode in real time. If we wanted to, we could flip a switch and live stream at the same time. And what happened there was we had it across these 3 large lecture halls. One of them is in South Campus, where a lot of the sciences are, and 2 of them were North Campus, where all the liberal arts are. Well, guess what? The one in South Campus was just completely used all the time, and the people at North, it's optional, so the people at North Campus were just not resistant, but they just didn't utilize it. And so we weren't forcing anybody. They came. The sciences came first, and as we scaled out, we invited lots of people, and we invited equally the North Campus and South Campus departments, but the sciences are the ones that heavily use the content or the service.
So this has been kind of real demand-driven then.
It is demand-driven, yeah.
What about for you, Todd? How did you decide on your platform? And I know you went through a change.
Yeah, so things were kind of humming along really well with Lictopia, the first tool that we rolled out in 2005. And then we were put into an awkward position because Lictopia was acquired by an American company called AnyStream, which then rebranded both the company and the product as Echo 360. And Echo did a great job in laying out kind of a transition roadmap for all the Lictopia customers, and there were a lot of things that were pretty compelling about that. Echo actually ended up being one of our finalists, even though we didn't pick them. But we really saw this as an opportunity to go back to our stakeholders, and these are people who had been using lecture capture for several years now and had a really clear idea of what they wanted. And so we engaged them in a formal process to do this transition, and we got together and figured out I think there were 54 key criteria that we came up with, the things that we wanted out of a lecture capture solution. And we looked at what then we thought of as the 8 leading candidates out there, and this was in 2009. And compared them and did like a numerical weighted scale thing where, we said, well, this feature is more important than that one, and ended up scoring all the different products. So Panopto, which is the tool that we picked, ended up just doing best in that. Although I should probably mention that Mediasite scored highest in our actual survey, but the cost was a huge factor there. And there was also a big factor with Mediasite at the time. They didn't have a software recording component, which they do now with, I guess, the relay integration.
Yeah.
So was it like an RFP, or was it a formal RFP, or was it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we sent it out to all the vendors, and the first round was, they listed, whether they do all these features or not, and we, took those results back, and then that let us weed out the initial round of candidates, and then we came up with 3 finalists that we actually evaluated. First on vendor-hosted infrastructure, and then on Duke infrastructure when we got really close to picking something.
So you had strong support at that point, and did you have a budget then from the Duke administration?
I am not sure. Actually, you'd have to talk to my boss about that.
But you had your marching orders.
I don't know exactly when that got finalized, but we knew we were going to go forward with something.
And Chuck, how'd you come to decide on MediaSite?
As I was mentioning, came down pretty much to myself and my boss, me going like, here's what we should buy, and her going, yeah, okay, do that.
And this was around 2006?
This was about 2005, late 2005.
Okay,
we were building the Kellogg Library building, have this immense library building where my office is and most of my staff are. And we were building video studios, audio studios. The entire second floor is all one kind of media and instructional development complex, which is another aspect of the department I was running at that time. And so really the MediaSite acquisition was really just a small part of a very much larger acquisition of equipment for all the studios and things, as you can imagine. And so on institutional radar, it was a relatively small item. It turned into a very large thing down the road. And I would say, I'd already been to places like Streaming Media, the Streaming Media West show, and talked to all the vendors. So I knew who the players were, and I'd done my own evaluation. And MediaSite looked like the right candidate at that time. And this is going way back at this point. In hindsight, now looking back at it now, there was an element of luck involved. I think we picked very well, and MediaSite and Sonic Foundry turned out to be a great company, a product that kept growing and extending itself, listened to us, listened to user feedback, and continued to develop and given us a platform we can grow with that's scalable and has worked well for us.
What's interesting here, is right now you hear really 3 different models here of how campuses came to both decide on doing lecture capture and decide on their solution. And this is something which I've seen, the more I talk to educators throughout higher education and elsewhere, I see this happen a lot. There are definitely campuses that are able to, decide at a very central level, let's do an RFP. And sometimes that's because 1 or 2 departments has started to do well with a particular technology, or as in the case of Duke, some other priority. We need content comes up, and it gets enough traction at central campus to move. In other cases, it's sort of a technology hits a beachhead. And it might be a single school, a single department, even a single faculty member begins using a technology. And, sort of I think what you ran into, Chuck, is that once you have chosen a platform, and even if it's a small installation, once you've captured this content and you've used this platform and you've managed it and you know it, there's a strong willingness to stay with that platform, right, especially if the company stays together and continues to provide good service. Where with Todd, you ran into a situation in which you were going to see some changes, and while there was a roadmap, that provide you some need and incentive to look at other things.
Another aspect for us is just that at Cal State San Marcos, we have one centralized IT organization that services the entire campus, so there are no silos of technology, which makes my life much easier from a technology deployment point of view. There's everybody that I need to speak to on the technical side, I can walk down to their office and speak to them. It's not like balkanized, so to speak.
Yeah, and there's silos. And I work at a school at Northwestern University, and so we have our own IT group, which I'm part of. We work with our central campus. But at Northwestern, lecture capture started happening at schools, and my school is one of the first to go forward. And as it turns out, the technology we chose ended up as well becoming a campus site license because it sort of spread almost virally as school by school started working together until finally it reached central campus. And I think for you at UCLA, it's interesting how you ended up being really driven by your customer demand. Right? Who is recording and what are their very specific needs, and deciding, well, there isn't necessarily one single platform, but we can make these technologies work. And I'm just curious, do you work closely with folks in these science and engineering departments? Do they have their own IT staff at all, or are you working with department personnel there at UCLA?
Yeah, that's what actually happens is we are very siloed. We have they have their own IT staff, but so we do not work with. What we're responsible for is 200 classrooms. They're called general assignment classrooms, and so the registrar uses those rooms to assign courses to. And what we do within the Office of Instructional Development is support those rooms with audiovisual equipment, and then it just so happens, and lecture capture. So our relationship with the instructor is very minimal. They are the customer. They make the request. Well, we send out an invitation to these rooms that are equipped. They make the request through a form, and we either can approve their request or because of other circumstances, we have to turn down some requests. Because there are some courses that we'll record with backpack systems, just a student running out with a camera. And of course, that's a human resource that you just can't do all over campus.
We have a forum too. Yeah, an online forum people go to, and then I have students that just take that information from the forums, get it into our unified calendar in Outlook, just because we're an Outlook campus, Microsoft, and approve or
Right.
or explain why we can't reschedule
Or
somewhere else.
compromise,
and
give them
then
another
send
option.
those confirmations onto the faculty so they know that when to show up and when and all that good stuff.
One of the things I did forget to say is these products, Katura, Panopto, Echo 360 Media Site, I haven't seen one that I've said, oh my goodness, that's horrible. They all work. They all seem to work great. They all do it a little differently, and they all have different pricing structures. And one of the things I forgot to say was that was one of the things that also kept us on just the traditional camera recording is the predictable cost that we know how much we have this year. We know how much so we can buy equipment. We can't always plan to have money for service agreements every year. So we realized that if we scaled this out too big, and then all of a sudden our budget's slashed, which is a very real scenario in this economic time, well, we didn't want to be all of a sudden have to scale back our service.
Right.
So that's kind of part of what driven
sustainability is definitely important, and it's definitely my experience that if you all of a sudden turn off that kind of service, there is blowback. You will hear
Right.
about it, even if it comes from budget. And I'm curious, maybe Todd, you can share if there's some really interesting applications you've seen for lecture capture at Duke.
I was thinking about that question. You posed that earlier to us, and I think probably instead of one particular class, really what we're thinking of, we're kind of branding a subcomponent of our service as Duke Capture Mobile, and this is this whole software-based capture. And really it's kind of in that area that I think a lot of the innovation is happening, because there's kind of a lot of resistance to the term lecture capture and to the idea of, just recording people standing up in front of a room, because it maybe in some people's minds facilitates outmoded forms of teaching. And so we're encouraging people to take this software and do creative things with it. In some cases that might mean an instructor flipping the class by recording a 15-minute introduction to a topic and having the students watch that before they come to class, and then using that class time more productively. We're seeing a lot of things happen with that software that are student-centered, that are pretty encouraging. In some cases, instructors are having students record themselves as part of an assignment. In some cases, students are using it to record their club activities or other things besides classes. And some examples in the divinity school, the preaching students are using it to, kind of watch themselves as they're preaching and kind of get feedback about, how they're doing. So it's really kind of in using that tool that I think a lot of the innovation is happening. And also there's for us a kind of a growth factor. I mean, we've kind of got most of our tier 1 classrooms and lecture halls already outfitted with the automated, scheduled recording. And so, it's going to take an investment in infrastructure to, put microphones and control panels and, all the infrastructure that supports the capture beyond just the appliance in the second and third tier rooms. So the growth is maybe going to happen in the mobile side.
So it sounds like you're having some curricula and programs really start to integrate the technology. It's allowing them to do things that they couldn't do before, in addition to providing this, post-class ability to review.
Yeah, we partner pretty closely with our Center for Instructional Technology that directly engages with faculty. I don't personally engage with faculty a whole lot, but it sounds like maybe Chuck, you do some of that in your group as well. But yeah, that partnership is really critical for this.
What's going on in San Marcos? What interesting things are going on?
Yeah, we came at things a little bit differently. Just that in terms of, we haven't really deployed MediaSite around a variety of classroom spaces around the organization. It wasn't like our growth plan was like, well, we'll buy 5 this year and 5 next year and 5 next year and kind of sprinkle them around different places. We actually made people come to us. So we picked a few specific places, obtained scheduling control of those places, which is key, and then we're able to like pick an entire class up and move it into that space as needed. So we can put all of our resources into making a few spaces have really excellent production values. Then you have the money to spend on acoustic treatment, on nice lighting, on the wireless microphones and all the other things one might need to really make it sound and look good. The problem with most of our classrooms, they're probably like most of your classrooms. They're built to some state specification, so they're flat floor, linoleum, pretty much bad light, windows on one side with sunlight coming in, like the worst case scenario for any kind of production value. And I didn't see the value in doing something when I was going to be creating bad content. It was going to degrade the value of the whole equation, the whole result. And so that's the way we did it. And actually it worked out very well. And so part of the key to the scalability of the way we did MediaSite is doing it that way, because then it was just turnkey for the instructor. The instructor could just walk in, teach their class like they normally teach their class. They didn't have to know anything about anything. They didn't have to know how MediaSite worked, push buttons, do anything. And walk in, hit stop, or one of our students hit stop, walk out, and they get emailed an URL like a half hour later, and they're good to go. So that, not having to think about it and making it just dead easy for them, meant that we were like cranking up and doing like 1,000, over 1,000 of these a year relatively quickly, because it didn't create any strain on the faculty to come and use it. And then they thought, well, can my students do this? Yeah, sure. And then the students come, and then so it's just grown and grown. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Do we take questions now?
Yeah, sure. If you have a quick question, we can take that. Rules are made to be broken.
When you're generating video at that volume, 1,000 hours a year, are you spending any time in post-production at all?
That's another
Before
key.
you answer, I do need to re-ask it so to make sure we get it recorded there. And the question is, when you're doing that many thousands of hours, are you doing any post-production?
Not much. Pretty much just trimming the ends off. That's about it. I have 2 students that are basically my MediaSite guys, right? That they just live in they live in that system more or less all the time, and student labor comes and goes. Folks graduate and move on, and so it's got to be a relatively modest level of training and experience required to do that. So really, it's pretty much just trimming ends, and most of the time, not even that. That was the other key to scalability: is we don't have to touch it, so IT staff isn't the bottleneck for growth. Because one of my basic philosophies of any system you're going to deploy in a university is like anything that we have to touch, I am totally going to become the bottleneck for that system. I don't care what it is. If I have to deliver it, if I have to edit it, if I have to, anytime I got to touch it. Nice thing about MediaSite and now this relay system that you mentioned as well, which has extended it from these specific rooms to just desktop recording. Any one of you, like with your laptop, could record a lecture anywhere you happen to be, and then it gets uploaded automatically, again, real easily to the MediaSite system. Again, we don't have to touch that. They're done. They hit stop. It processes on the server somewhere in our cloud right now, and then they get an URL emailed back to them in a half hour. Yay, and I didn't have to touch anything, unless we screwed something up,
So Daniel, what kind of interesting things are you seeing happening at UCLA, or how has this capacity been knit into some programs or curricula?
One of the things that surprised us was we realized at some point this might be used for online education, and we were saying, please don't do that. The production values here are not equal to that which should be for online education. You're setting up, or the lighting's not great sometimes, and if the camera's not set right, you don't get a great shot. But is it usable for studying, for a student to review? Absolutely. So that's our purpose. But that said, I think it was last fall. It might have actually been it may have been fall 2010 or 2011. No, it had been 2010. What happened was probably about 2 weeks before the quarter began, one of our chemistry instructors contacted us and said, "Oh, you got to make sure to record this because we've over-enrolled the class by 30%. And this is a 200-person classroom, so you got 60 students that are not ever going to walk into the classroom and completely depending on what we do. And up to that point, we were not 100%. So we even told them, we're not 100%. This is not a good idea. Well, they said, too late. We're already doing it, And then I think the following year, we had 2-3 weeks into the quarter, we missed this history recording that we didn't manage to capture. And all of a sudden, our help email, Bruincast help email, just exploded. And we found out that a history class had also over-enrolled the course. And they both went at it really different ways. And as far as like letting the student know when they signed up that, no, you are not going to actually attend the class. So the student knew that, okay, my choice is either I wait till next quarter or next year to take this class, or I take it this way. And so that was unexpected. We were involved in that. We just captured it, but as far as the policies behind it, those were worked out with the department and the student. It was very interesting. One of the other projects we're working on, just kind of going to technology, is what we're doing right now, which I think is really interesting, is we're using HD cameras that are controlled over IP. This is allowing us to leverage our student staff that records one-on-one, and they're able to now, from a central place, back in our main library or in our audiovisual services department, at a computer workstation, just sit down and they can remote into this camera system and encoding system and record the room. What's great about this IP-based system is if for some reason the network goes down in this one location, we can just pick up and go to another location, find an IP address, probably do a little bit of VPN tunneling and get to that encoder, and
we're doing the same thing.
Just start recording. So it's a great way to leverage student staff.
It's interesting that point you brought up though about the overcrowding, because it's something actually the CEO for Echo 360 wrote a fairly provocative editorial last year in the fall, sort of basically saying, here's an opportunity for lecture capture as unfortunately school budgets go down and there's overcrowding at both the K through 12 and at the post-secondary level. Here's an opportunity for lecture capture to fill in a gap when you really maybe don't have the space to accommodate these different things. And I also look at it from a modality standpoint and learning styles. There are some students who actually aren't best served by sitting in a large lecture hall and might actually do better in a blended environment with lectures. Also, sort of as you mentioned before, the flipped classroom paradigm, where the lecture comes before the class meeting, so you can maximize your time in the class meeting in true one-on-one or group processes between students, rather than just sitting there and being conduits for information coming at them. There's a lot of interesting applications that we're seeing that are growing up around lecture capture, and I think that that's also where we're starting to see lecture capture get knitted into programs, whether it's for self-evaluation, as you mentioned there, Todd. It's something that we do at Northwestern. We have public speaking students who are recorded in class so they can evaluate themselves, so the instructor can evaluate again, and so there can be peer evaluation. We also do the same thing for leadership projects, and we'll talk more about that at a session after lunch, where we go into that sort of student-generated realm. But then we see now, as more universities are joining these large MOOCs, right, these massive online courses, lecture capture is definitely playing in, because you do, again, being driven by the need for content. And I think what I've seen happen as a trend is it gets started and we just go, and then we start to tweak. right? And you figure out how do we build some production value into it? How do we provide that camera control so that you are keeping cameras on? How do we really begin adapting it to these different curricula so that it's no longer this one-size-fits-all model, although the technology in the back end, we hope, is often a one-size-fits-all. And now I'd like to turn it over to you all to see if you have some more questions here. There in the back corner. And please, before you answer, let me repeat the question to the recording.
Let me just have a description. I'm thinking of one remote camera in the back with plug-in mics, and you have a student monitoring elsewhere. I'm trying to get the visual setup of your setup, and you usually use one mic. And is the student, are you using automatic aim control, or is the student actually miking? And are you actually, is there any sound pickup of the classroom itself when you're doing this? I'm just trying to get the animal.
Right.
And no light. It's just the lighting that's in the room.
Yeah.
So the question is, just give a sense of what the setups that you have going on. Jack, you can go ahead and answer what you're doing there at San Marcos.
Ours is a complete, I'll admit it, it's a kludge, but it works anyway, and it's relatively inexpensive. So as people have mentioned, one of the things about MediaSite is that buying the appliances themselves to do the recording is relatively expensive. So I can't afford to buy them, and I have a bunch of relatively large lecture halls I'd like to put these things in. So we got to figure out a different way. We're doing the same thing you're talking about. We got, I assume it's like HD, really security cameras. But now the security cameras stream H.264 over the network. So it's great looking video. It's HD video. It doesn't hit the network hard. The network guys are all happy about it, because we're streaming at like 1.5 megabits, something like that. Doesn't hurt anything. So basically, we're putting one camera in find a sweet spot in the room somewhere where you get a good look at the front of the room where nobody can escape. And what we've been doing for the microphone, we route the audio directly to that camera because these modern security cameras have audio inputs on them. Who knew? And they will mux the audio signal in the H.264 video stream. And then we take since these are in big rooms, the audio, the instructors are mic'd in big lecture halls, and so we just point a little shotgun microphone at a ceiling speaker in the room. I told you it was a kludge, but it's legible. It's you can understand what people are saying, and that's the key. And it's already gone through our rack, so it's already been EQ'd, and it's about as happy as the sound's going to get in that kind of a situation.
What about over at Duke? What are some scenarios?
So although we operate our lecture capture service centrally at Duke, we actually delegate the building of the classrooms out to the folks that are out in the schools and departments, because we actually are very distributed. And people at the business school or at the law school want to do their own thing. They have their own media teams. And so they're the ones that are actually building these classrooms. So there's a lot of variety in terms of the infrastructure in the rooms. That said, the basic model is that you've got a Dell Optiplex PC that has DataPath and Osprey capture cards in it. That thing is racked in the back of the room and out of the way of anyone being able to access it. The signals are routed in, and everything's pretty much automated.
Are the cameras a single view, or do you have PT to pan-tilt zoom?
We have a combination. I think most of them are fixed view in the back of the room. There are some that are PTZ. There's some that have, a couple of rooms have like mats, that have positions for the camera to zero in on when you step on the mat.
Okay. And Daniel, you mentioned you have some still situations where you have the students with backpacks. You said now we're using IP control cameras. What are you doing for audio? That seemed to be a big component of that question.
Yeah, actually, the audio is probably one of the single most important thing that you can plan for. Yeah. Because if your audio is not good, your video doesn't mean anything, and so your students aren't going to use it. And we'll get the question like, "Oh, should I post this video up?" There's no audio. What good is it? What we have the benefit of is within the Office of Instructional Development, our classroom designer, the person the team that installs, is right there with us. They're literally next door to my office. So I just walk down the hallway, sit down. His name's Greg, and say, "Hey, Greg, what's going on? Here's what we're trying to do." And so we're able to actually, because we have installers in house, which most schools don't. They have to contract that out. But since we have them in house, we're able to integrate right into the system. It's just tied right in there. So the audio is coming off just the one lavalier. We tried taking what was coming out of the mixer, so you had multiple microphone inputs. We tried taking the program audio from the media, and we found that just problematic. And what we did find was with the wireless lavalier system, compressed the right way, you will get the student question and answer. And as a policy, we don't record students, so you hear their voice, but you won't see them.
We have 2 classrooms where we have stick mics at all the student stations, and we use a big Clear One matrix mixer to make it all work. It's because we also use it for video conferencing. And it's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because you do get lots of good audio from the room. It's a curse because inevitably you get complaints from the student who thought he or she was whispering something very secret to the person next to them, and it was recorded loud and clear.
We're a small local arts university. I get a lot of questions as we're trying to evangelize the concept of lecture capture. Has anyone done any research in learning outcomes and the assessment of what the value of spending all this money and time, and also convincing professors that it has value to them? And what have you done along that line to see that?
So the question is there research out there on learning outcomes? And I think you're talking about sort of the more traditional lecture capture model.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
An increase in student grades is that, what is the value of having?
Does it increase grades and things like that?
Can I go first?
Yeah.
Yeah, each one of these companies, they'll tell you that your students will become geniuses. But they do all actually have studies that talk about the learning outcomes, and they're legit. And you can read them, and you can take a look at the white papers, and they're fantastic. At UCLA, we only did one very simple test where the same instructor taught the same class, 2 different classes, made lecture capture available to one group and not to the other class. And what happened was at the end, we found out that, it's about the same. The distribution is about the same. But one of the things that you can't measure is, how much time did the student spend preparing? How hard was it for one group of students to study versus the other? We didn't take a look at that. If we ever do a study again, we probably will, to really understand. If we get feedback from surveys, the students definitely have this confidence level that this helps them. And then when you're talking with students with disabilities, learning disabilities, they are the most grateful. They're the ones that tell us, without this, I would not have passed this class.
Yeah. You have a quick answer to that?
No, we actually had a professor in our College of Arts and Sciences do her own informal survey of students before the class and afterwards about the value that using Panopto brought, and it was pretty striking actually. Both the comfort factor, the students themselves were actually recorded as part of an assignment, and the comfort factor and the sense of value that they got from it was pretty clear in the numbers that she.
All right, time for one more question, right here. Yeah.
So videos, the lectures tends to be longer in the nature, right? Probably hour, half an hour, and these days, people don't have time. So do you guys see the need for analytics? Let's say there are 2 professors speaking. Who is speaking what? When you straight away jump to somebody saying algebra and all the different subjects. So you see the need for analytics. Otherwise, what I have seen is if the videos are longer in the nature, you don't see the consumption going high. So you need some sort of analytics on top of the video so that people can traverse inside the video to the point they want to see.
So the question is basically, do people know what's in the video? Can they traverse to where they want to see the content they want to see? Because we're talking often with lecture capture, 2-hour lectures. Can I get to the point where you address the subject that I really need to brush up on?
Yep. We've actually got a pretty cool pilot going on this semester where we're exporting audio out of our Panopto recordings and pushing them over to a Cisco Media Experience Engine system and doing automated speech to text. And this is definitely a pilot kind of a thing because the accuracy isn't that great, but it's great for what we're calling keyword tagging in search. And Panopto has really great built-in search capability. So bringing these lectures back, you get a caption track. It doesn't really work as a word-for-word transcription, but if you're searching for a particular topic, that's a really amazing way to do it. And for us, the value of operating at a large scale is that one day, we hope at Duke, you'll be able to search for any term that you're interested in and have access to the entire body of lectures that were recorded. So.
Same thing on the media site side. It supports the same kind of thing. It will OCR, has an OCR aspect that will go through an OCR text in PowerPoints and web pages and things like that. It'll also, and then since we caption everything, it's required by law here in California, then we have a transcript of everything as well. One of the really key things that we haven't spoken about, but the catalog function of the media site system, the ability to add metadata, and the searchability and the security aspects, integration with LDAP and logins and all that sort of thing, single sign-on, is a really key part of the media site system. We've leveraged that a lot for a lot of other purposes other than lecture capture, just for straight media delivery as well as all of adding all this metadata, searchability, and the random access to different points in a media stream. And we try and encourage faculty to keep these short if they can, because people will not sit and listen, with the best will in the world,
Well,
for 2 hours.
We've come to the end of our panel. I appreciate you all coming. I appreciate the great questions. Of course, you come up and talk with folks one-on-one afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you.